I must survive to protect my family. I can't lose them. I can't feel that pain again.
Some agents on the Valorant protocol have had terrible things happen to them and people they care about or were brought up in awful conditions. Today I'm going to show you every agent that has had a tragic experience happen sometime in their past. You may be surprised on just how many personal tragedies have occurred to them. One of those agents, of course, is Cypher. As we just heard in the quote in the opening of this video, Cypher is deeply affected by the loss of his family. So much so that he carries the legacy and will do everything in his power to keep his new family, the Valorant Protocol, alive and well. But before we talk about the tragedy of Cypher losing his family, we need to talk about his upbringing first. Some of you probably know this, but Cypher grew up incredibly poor, scrounging around for scraps in the streets of Rabat, Morocco. If that city sounds familiar to you, it's actually the same city that the map Bind is located on. We know this from a few key voice lines Cypher says while on the map.
What has Kingdom done to this town? However pretty their lies are, they're just sucking my city dry.
And then here are the voice lines showing us the struggles Cypher had while growing up.
You think I don't know how to get by without money? The back alleys or the streets of war. There is no difference, just nicer toys.
Okay, so right off the bat, Cypher didn't have the greatest time in his childhood. Only people who have lived like this know the true struggles of what it's like to grow up like that. So it must have felt amazing for Cypher when he finally met Nora. Now, Nora is someone very, very close to Cypher. We know this from a few voice lines, and if you add the details together, it paints an awful story. So we can assume that Nora was Cypher's wife. As far as I know, he never 100% actually said that, but considering we know Cypher's family are dead and he calls out to Nora when he's injured and on very low HP in game, it's a safe assumption.
Nora, I will see you again.
Now, I think the saddest thing of them all, though, is that Cypher has hinted at a few times that he has hope he will see them again. It looks like his awful grief cycle isn't complete because he has hope he'll be able to one day be with his family again. Listen to what he says when he gets revived from Sage during battle.
For a moment, I saw them.
So it looks like that as Cypher's consciousness was slipping into whatever afterlife he believes in, before Sage pulled him out with her radiant powers, he saw his family. I think this is getting Cypher's mind racing on if there is just any possibility he can be with them without directly just dying. Check out what he says to Sage and you tell me if you have the same thoughts I'm having on this.
So, Sage, you can bring people back from the dead? Anyone? No constraints? Interesting.
I don't know, guys. Sounds to me Cypher might try using Sage's power to revive his family. Now, I doubt Sage will be on board with doing this because, I mean, who knows what will happen if it's been years since that person has died, as opposed to only a few minutes when in battle, like what we see in Valorant. But if we know anything about Cypher, he might use alternative ways to get Sage to help if he wanted to, things like blackmail even as leverage. Well, let's move on to the next tragic backstory for an agent, and this one is going to be, of course, you guys probably saw this one coming, we just have to talk about Breach. Just like Cypher, he didn't get a fair chance in his childhood. Breach was born into a family of crime, but that's not even all of it. He was also born as a congenital amputee, meaning he was born without arms. I can only imagine how tough life would be without something we take for granted, well, like arms, especially if you're a kid. But let's get back to the Torsten's family life of crime. It's likely he didn't even get a say in it, and when you're a kid and all you know is what your parents teach you, things can get bad really quick. Well, Eric Torsten, or Breach, would soon find out just how bad things can get. Somehow his family got arrested and everyone was up for trial. The judge on their case was understandably harsh on the family for all of the awful things they've done over the years and gave them extensive prison sentences. But the judge also had mercy for one person, Breach. Due to him being an amputee and likely pretty young at the time, he didn't give Breach the same sentence as the rest of the family. It was a much shorter one. Still, he served time though. Once he got out, he built himself mechanical arms to finally do the things he wanted to do. Unfortunately, those things, just like the rest of his family, was criminal activity. But Breach would take on his own assignments and actually became notorious for the terrible things he did. It's a cycle. Maybe if he was given a better life with a more loving and, well, law-abiding family, things would be different. But Breach was far gone. We can only imagine the things he did, but we know for sure he used to steal and burglarize very frequently.
Guns in my face. Just another Tuesday.
It got so bad that the police were onto him a lot and he had to go into hiding. He sent himself into exile just to stay off law enforcement's radar and left his home. The garage we see in the Valorant Twitter Takeover Series video is likely the hideout he chose. This is where he met Tiana Alves, or better known to us as Raze. Now, although Raze and Breach were partners in crime, like literally, they would constantly steal stuff together and honestly just be, well, criminals, it's likely that Raze had a positive effect on Breach. Eventually, Breach would join the Valorant Protocol later in his life and would have his criminal record wiped, letting him come out of hiding. He still has his ways and still has urges to steal things, like listen to what he says when he arrives on the map Split, the Kingdom headquarters.
Look at this place. Kingdom has more money than they know what to do with. I wonder where they keep it.
But I do think that he is improving and is absolutely nowhere near the same person he used to be. Next up on my list of agents with a tragic backstory is Phoenix. Now, you may be surprised with this one. I mean, after all, Phoenix seems to be like the happiest and most outgoing person on the Valorant Protocol. Well, his past is sort of a mystery as we don't know a ton about it, but there are a few details that are kind of concerning. His name is Jamie Ademi, and he grew up in the Peckham district of the United Kingdom. His upbringing is fuzzy. Some people believe he was an orphan and lived on an orphanage, but there's no evidence to support that currently, at least what I can find. Now, the one thing though that does concern me is that when Phoenix became a Radiant, he was attending a performing arts school at that time. It's kind of funny if you think about it. I think performing arts is like totally Phoenix's personality. But a tragedy occurred there when Phoenix was just beginning to understand how to use his Radiant powers. One thing is for certain, and a somewhat common theme with Radiants, it is difficult to get a control of their abilities, especially when they first become Radiants. In Phoenix's example, the combination of his Radiant power being extremely destructive and his reckless personality was a recipe for disaster. One night, his performing arts school would go up in flames, and it was all Phoenix's fault. We don't know what happened, but it's presumed an accident occurred with Phoenix when he couldn't yet get a grasp on his powers, and the result was the school catching on fire. Now, we don't know if he was instigated, leading to it, or if he was practicing his Radiant powers, or really what happened. We also don't know if any of his fellow students died in the blaze. This is just what I'm thinking, but I feel like everyone made it out alive. Because if some people wouldn't have made it out during this fire, I think it would eat at Phoenix's consciousness. Since he never talks about it or it doesn't seem to negatively impact his mood that we've seen, I'm assuming everyone lived, but that's just a guess. It's not as tragic of a story, of course, as Cypher losing his entire family or Breach's unfortunate childhood, but I felt like I should mention this. If we want to stay on the topic of tragedies occurring due to the accidents of Radiants on the Valorant Protocol, we have to talk about Phoenix's good friend Jett. Sunwoo Han, or Jett, grew up in South Korea and still lives there to this day when she's not with the Valorant Protocol. The capital of South Korea, Seoul, is where she would learn how to become a chef. There are a few voice lines Jett has about her memories as a chef, memories that would be shrouded by a disaster because of Jett.
Feels like just yesterday I was chopping tale at the store. Wonder if that place is still standing.
Ugh, Jett, that place is probably not standing. Well, the same situation happened with Jett that we saw with Phoenix. While learning how to control and contain her powers after acquiring them, she would accidentally summon a wind tornado that carved into downtown Seoul. It was a theory with strong evidence behind it in the past, but officially became confirmed and canon to Valorant's lore when Fade leaked out all the dossiers of the Valorant agents when she was the blackmailer. Let's read Jett's. Sunwoo Han, always on the move, anything to keep you running. You ran after the restaurant was all but destroyed. A freak storm, they called it. How unusual. You ran after Venice. Your face was everywhere. Enemy of the world, a dangerous Radiant. Those who knew you were horrified, disgusted even, ashamed. You claim you're innocent, that it wasn't you. Perhaps you even believe it. But can you really outrun what people think of you? End quote. we can see the image of what the carnage looked like as the accidental wind tornado was going through the city. We never got any details on if anyone got injured or died. There was a lot of destruction though, but it does look like Jett thinks about it a lot, and according to Fate at least, it may even eat at her psyche a bit when she thinks about it. Now, this video wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about Omen. I'm going to try to keep this one short because I'm assuming all of you know by now that Omen used to be a human and had a terrible thing happen to him that turned him into the Shadow Walker he is today. It is still unclear if this was an intentional experiment that Omen volunteered for or if it was an accident altogether. But regardless, Viper or Sabine was involved. We know Omen and Viper used to work together as scientists for the kingdom. One day, something happened. Again, we don't know if it was intentional or not, but Omen died. Now, that normally wouldn't be an issue as Viper called upon Sage to do what, she always does and bring people back from the dead. But most likely due to how Omen died, he did not come back a human or really anything close to resembling what he used to be. He came back a monster, constantly in pain, a shadow encased in armor, barely able to contain himself in it. Omen constantly has to focus on keeping his quote-unquote body together just to stay alive. It really is sad because he has amnesia and can't really remember anything of importance of his past life. He can't remember his name or most of who he used to be. He's constantly looking for answers but can never find any. I really do hope one day not only Omen but us the fans can find out what really happened and see if Omen will have to live in this hellish nightmare for the rest of his life, if you could even call it that. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter, links in the description. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to notifications if you're new. Now with all that being said, Jeppy out!